Offended Be Offended Not Offensive, a blog to book on the topic of communication by Nicholas Andrew Stewart. Why is being offended better than being offensive? When you're offended you will be motivated to do good or bad. When you're offensive you have done the wrong thing and will feel bad. Doing the right thing is what's needed. Listening to offensive talk is remedied by positive self-talk. It's hard to believe but the offended prevails over the offensive. You can dislike what you want, it's your choice, but you can only feel offended when someone or something has intentionally been offensive. You don't want to be offended but you certainly don't want to be offensive. Preferably you can avoid their offensive so as to not be offended, and don't be offensive yourself. Chances are that you will be offended and at times you may be offensive. Being offensive would get you into trouble every time because offended people have a defensive strategy to overcome your offensive. Reassure yourself with positive self-talk when they're verbally offensive. Usually means to understand to just ignore their offensive talk. Say to yourself you haven't done anything wrong. If you haven't done anything wrong, move on and feel good you're not offensive. If they have a positive message but are offensive you will feel the need to consider their positive message and judge that they're offensive about it. Just consider their positive message and feel good you're not offensive. With serious verbal threats and people inappropriately being physical, best to involve police and lawyers etc. It's a part of their job to take care of situations like that. Thinking about something wrong, doing something wrong, saying something wrong and feeling something wrong makes you feel bad. So think about something right, do something right, say something right and feel something right makes you feel good. Be offended not offensive equals because being offensive is like committing a sin. Be offended not offensive equals be offended by sin. Be offended by offensive dislike sin. Dislike offensive don't sin. Don't be offensive. Love is the prevailing influence in life and possibly even in the afterlife. It all comes down to how love or good prevails. There is nothing love or good can't defeat, leaving you feeling good nearly all the time. It is obvious love wins and you can reassure yourself of that in every situation. In fact, it's probably a good idea that you do reassure yourself that good wins. It's important to do good things, the right things, so as not to be in a bad situation. As you read, it's okay if you disagree or agree. Think I'm wrong or right, either way this blog will be helpful to you. After the offensive talker feels good or letting out frustration, offensive people judge themselves and concludes that they did wrong or more wrong so they feel bad. After the offended feels bad, the offended usually judge themselves and conclude they didn't do wrong or did less wrong so they feel good. Offended people feel more bad than good. Offended people feel more good than bad equals if you don't like it, that's too bad for you. Sometimes you would believe that the continuous offensive talker must have a lot of negative feelings that they haven't yet received because they don't seem to understand. Rest assured though, justice prevails. Offensive people, if they are to change, need to understand their offensive ways belong to them and the bad feelings like guilt belong to them and are there to help them understand how to be a better person. If they do wrong they always feel worse than their victims. Be happy, be offended, don't be upset and offensive. Be careful of being too offended. Try to turn offended feelings back into happy feelings quickly. Offended turns into happy automatically, but try to help the process along if you feel the need to. If you feel bad and if you feel no one but yourself is to blame for how you feel, then it's likely that you want your life to improve and are frustrated with lack of improvement. A lot of the time you feel bad from no fault of your own but from the environment you're in, people saying or doing things you don't really like. For example, you watch TV, listen to the radio, operate a computer and live around other people and sometimes they might do or say something you don't like. On the other hand, go to a peaceful place like a park by yourself with no one else around and you would likely feel at peace the whole time you're there because it's a peaceful environment unlike the other. You like to listen to some things but not others. Why? Some say things that are like claiming life is bad, offensive and threatening. How? By disturbing the peace and losing focus on peace. When someone is trying to offend you it's often really about how you are doing good, feeling good and being good, and how they are being inappropriate. Their tough guy attitude is a coping strategy for their insecurity. They act tough to feel like they have control. They always think that their communication and behavior is appropriate for what they are dealing with, putting up an offensive fight response. It's common for offensive people to talk in a way that insults their victim's intelligence. The offensive people think they are better than other people. It's not about being equal for them, so they try and make people feel hurt because they got hurt. They try to bring me down to their level. They think they are smart if they hurt someone and that someone appears to them as losing a fight. because you don't want the attention that being offensive creates. When they involve you by being offensive towards you, you're usually a part of someone else's attention and they would be concerned with the whole lot. If you handle yourself appropriately, you would appear to any witness a better person compared to the offensive person. When people are loud and offensive, it acts like an alarm to surrounding people. It's possible the reason you feel offended by the noise, alarm, etc. is because you know the people need help and they don't usually get it, or the right thing to do is to address the offensive thing, and if you don't, then you've basically done the wrong thing. Usually it's a loss of focus on peaceful conditions that is upsetting about loud offensive talk. A lot of offensive talk you simply don't ever expect to hear, so can feel a bit shocking, resulting in some anxiety. So much offensive talk, you nearly feel better if you considered the offensive talk as just normal, appropriate, reasonable, excusable communication. A lot of the time you would misinterpret offensive talk for just everyday communication. The two mixes in so well together it's hard to distinguish sometimes. If you have to listen to offensive noise for longer periods of time, neighbors like to party is an example. A good investment would be something like a smartphone that comes with headphones and a built-in digital radio. Another good investment is earplugs when trying to sleep. If that doesn't remedy the problem, knocking on their door to ask them to be quiet really does help fix the problem. Obviously there is a degree of risk involved, so calling the police can seem like a good idea. Be aware that involving the police can complicate the matter a lot. You could get in trouble yourself and the offender can retaliate. With a lot of offensive talk in a single period or over many separate periods, it's a good idea to balance the scales in favor of things being positive again. You would assume that the right thing to do would be to help when someone is offensive, talking loud and basically asking for trouble. I wonder if you actually feel bad for not helping them. Usually if people don't get the help they need, other people suffer as well. If you think something bad is happening, you either correct it or ignore it. They are the right things to do. Worrying and being concerned will help you understand, but you'll feel bad. When upset or offended, no matter what you do, say, or feel, you will feel hurt and or guilt depending on how you react. To distinguish that what you experienced is something you dislike, and in future to avoid the upsetting offending thing. Often the offensive or upsetting thing is loud noise. It makes you lose concentration and you focus for a short time on the upsetting thing, and that's not what you want to do. Everyone gets upset. It's not usually a good idea to involve other people when upset. It complicates the matter and aggravates the upset condition. When upset, if someone has clearly done something to upset you, it's understandable that you are upset. But if someone witnesses you being upset and doesn't understand when, what, how and why you became upset, you could be in trouble with the person who doesn't understand. If you are upset and your behavior doesn't make sense in regard to what you are dealing with, you could get in trouble. Being upset within reason is used to rationalize offensive things and to communicate that you are experiencing a dislike and in future avoid offensive thing. Gain life experience. Remind avoid offensive thing. Being upset is normal adapting behavior from when you're born till old age. Being overly upset is considered being out of control and is risky behavior. Expect to be in trouble if overly upset. When upset, you feel bad because it's possible that other people don't understand and or you could be overreacting and get into trouble. When upset, you try to communicate that you're smarter and a better person than the person/s that tried to upset you. When upset, you feel hurt while the offensive person feels good, or letting out some frustration. After the event is over, the offensive person feels bad for having done the wrong thing, and you will start to feel good again if you didn't do anything wrong. A lot of the time it's even more upsetting to think that they don't feel bad for having done the wrong thing, but rest assured they do. Everyone does and always will feel bad for having done the wrong thing. Most small offensive things aren't worth getting upset over. Personal attacks are harder to deal with. Long periods of offensive things are harder to deal with, but it's always best not to react. Anger and anxiety help you to react. Always best to ignore. Change subject to positive one. Retreat and positive self-talk. When upset or offended, you feel hurt because it's something you dislike. React to the offending or upsetting thing and you will feel guilt. There really is nothing you can do to feel good in that moment of being offended and upset by someone or something. Just regain focus on positive when you can. Remember, you're responsible for how you feel, so you would want to feel good however you can. Always do the right thing. We get upset, offended and hurt to help determine what we dislike from what we like. When upset, you go from focusing on something peaceful to focusing on something hurtful. When upset, you are off course from what you were previously focusing on. When you're no longer upset, you regain your thoughts of your previous focus on happy things. You would find it difficult to focus on happy things and upsetting things at the same time. If you act differently to what you would normally when upset, you will always feel bad, guilt. Support from other people that care for you can help you overcome upsetting things. Retreating to a more peaceful environment helps to overcome upsetting things. Being silent in a silent environment helps to overcome upsetting things. Positive self-talk and reassuring yourself that you're okay help to overcome upsetting things. Being upset to the point that other people are aware of it is risky. There is little productive use for being upset or offensive unless you need to psychically fight. Because if you get upset, you're putting up a fight response, and apart from that you will feel embarrassed for not being in control of your emotions when you know you should be. Getting upset is a part of life, but being upset is dangerous. When upset or dealing with something offensive, you will have anxiety and or anger for a fight or flight reaction. React or retreat people are always doing the right thing, putting up a fight or flight reaction, feeling anxiety, anger or having fun. Offensive talkers are putting up an offensive fight response or having fun. Offensive talk negatively affects the offensive person more than their victim, and often the offensive message simply doesn't make sense. When they're offensive, it's their way of saying they are smarter and stronger than the victim. It's about them feeling like they are better than someone else. If they want you to believe that they're better than you in sarcasm or honesty, they're really saying that they're not better than you. It's a sign of insecurity about who they are compared to their victim. If they're communicating offensively, they're asking for trouble and for help. People are acutely aware of right and wrong, so don't be fooled into thinking that offensive people doing wrong don't feel bad for what they've done. They do. People feel bad even over the slightest of harmful things. Everyone is acutely aware of what they do and say has consequences. You are always held accountable to what you do and say. You held accountable usually by your own conscience. Do the right things, so there isn't a lot to worry about. Then they try to concern you, upset you with things that aren't really a concern. You deal with it appropriately, usually ignore it, and you will be a better person because of it, and it will appear like that to anyone that witnesses the fake concern. It would be reasonable to assume that if you communicate offensively or do the wrong thing, there are consequences like feeling guilt, having regrets, feeling sorry, feelings that can last a lifetime. And wrong applies to everyone. People are mostly cautious as to not get involved in wrongdoing. It's not like people doing the wrong thing ever get away without their consequences. Why do you need to learn to do only the right thing? You do need to learn to be always concerned with other people. Be very careful to not get caught up in wrong things. Do the right things. There is a tendency for people to do a little wrong to co-op with other things that are wrong. Why you would assume that the right thing to do would be to help when someone is offensive, talking loud and basically asking for trouble. I wonder if you actually feel bad for not helping them. Usually if people don't get the help they need, other people suffer as well. Be careful, their offensive talk can upset you. Don't get upset. How you feel is your responsibility. Their concerning behavior can motivate you to be a better person, but it also can help you do the wrong thing. I like to think of things in good and bad. Do the right thing and do the right thing with what is wrong. Instincts are a key survival tool. Always judge people if they seem like they're dangerous to you. Totally avoid them and don't have them in your life. It is always very important to have a keen sense of right and wrong. Like an animal instinct or sixth sense, you need to be aware of danger before it happens. Most situations that aren't a real concern in life, the more you understand it, is hilariously funny. Concern yourself with the right things, not the wrong things. Don't ever forget to treat concern with respect. Don't pretend to be concerned, and be ready for anything that's a real concern. It's always about doing the right thing. They go to a lot of trouble to make you feel concerned, upset, offended, etc. If you believe it's really of no concern to you, then it's of no concern to you. A lot to be concerned about usually means a lot to be not concerned about. Real concern is real concern. You may find that it would help to enjoy their attempts to concern you with things that aren't really of concern to you. If you haven't really got much to be concerned about in your life, there would be plenty of concern outside of your life. Is it possible that you're not really concerned? So strangely, there are a lot of reasons to be concerned. The time in between enjoying life and being concerned is usually short, but it's a lifelong occurrence. You will continue for your whole life to balance confidence and concern. As long as you do the right things, you should be okay. There is a lot of concern, threats, etc. coming from all different directions. If you worry about them too much or just focus too much on them, you can lose concentration. Focus on positive things and your main objective. People can make a simple task a lot harder with inappropriate concerns and threats. Reassure yourself that you're okay and you didn't do anything wrong if you get caught up in their fake concern, offensive talk, etc. Always be smart and on alert for real concerns. Deal with them by doing the right thing. Offensive people have doubts and guilt, etc. That's where they get their chance to change their behavior, where they know they've done something wrong and where they get some punishment for doing wrong. It's where they need to understand right from wrong. When people are offensive, they assume you're upset. When people are being loud and offensive, they're seeking attention for someone to help them with who they are. Win or lose, they don't care. They're seeking to move forward with punishment for what they've done wrong, or to know that someone feels like them. They're suffering. Also, they're loud and offensive because they get a good feeling from letting out frustration, without much fear of consequences. Would there likely to be consequences? Yes. Guilt, doubt, etc. People who use loud offensive talk as a coping strategy regularly seem to be asking for trouble and for help. They assume that because they suffered from offensive talk that others should suffer as well. From experience, humility, if handled right, can help those with aggressive offensive loud talking problems. The direction their offensive nature is heading is quite concerning. It's a real wonder how they think they can manage not to go too far with their offensive nature without getting into more serious trouble. Knowing how they don't usually stop until someone gets hurt, makes it all the more concerning, and a wonder that more preventative measures aren't taken. Often the offensive people use their behavior to try and coerce you into acting like them, and if you do, you will experience a lot of guilt and other negative emotions. Offensive talk can be annoying because it takes your attention away from peaceful things. Offensive talk can also be a sign of physical danger. Physical threats, etc. are real concerns. Often the offensive person will try and make you feel like you've done something wrong, that you deserve their offensive talk. Just reassure yourself, check and tick off all the things you didn't do, because it's likely that not only did you do nothing wrong, but if you did, there would be an appropriate way of dealing with it. Was it something I did or done? Was it something I said? Was it the way I walk? The way I drive? The way I look? They're the areas they try to say you did something wrong. With offensive loud communication, it acts like an alarm to other people around that someone needs help. Honestly, you would find that the people being loud and offensive are having fun asking for trouble, and there really isn't as much concern as you think. A real concern, it usually is, though. When people are offensive, they mainly offend themselves. Their victim is well aware of the need to do the right things, and that includes helping the offensive person learn to do the right thing. The offensive person has most of the consequences to help them understand they need to be a good person. Any witnesses will have a bad feeling or consequence as a sign to correct the wrong thing. Offensive people are always asking for trouble, wanting to know someone suffers because of them and or someone is offensive like them. They're always subconsciously asking for help. They're asking for help because they don't know how to keep the peace. Offensive people love to blame others, and they don't have much ability to tolerate and keep the peace or understand that it's possible they feel bad because of something they did and not their intended victim. They're mainly offensive for a good feeling they get or letting out frustration, but they're well aware that saying the wrong thing has its consequences, like feeling guilt, having doubts, etc. That's where they need to again understand right from wrong and feel bad because they need to improve. They continue to be offensive talkers because there is a good feeling associated to it, and any bad feeling they have they usually blame on someone else, and they use the bad feeling to be more offensive. I think that being offensive, it's a coping strategy. They're always initially thinking it's appropriate what they say, and it makes them feel good putting up the fight, and they're confident going down the defensive path. Keeping the peace when confronted with a reason to be offensive is much more likely to be a positive experience because you will not be to blame for disturbing the peace. As soon as they put up an offensive fight response, they're a part of the problem. They will feel guilt because they are. Offensive talking people think their victims are worse off than them because they're being threatening, but it's not true because it usually comes down to the offensive person feeling real guilt and their victim feeling fake concern because they usually haven't done anything wrong. In cases where they have, and they're made to feel guilty, the guilt isn't ever as bad as the offensive person's if they really are an offensive person, because everyone knows there are appropriate ways of dealing with things. Every time someone talks offensively, it sounds like they're dying on the inside. It sounds like they're hurt, complaining how they're suffering. So talking offensively is usually about being hurt. The victim usually doesn't have anything to worry about. Judge their offensive language. Is it a real concern? If it's really no concern, then it's really no concern. You can mostly ignore upsetting and offensive things when you can't psychologically detach yourself from them, when you feel it doesn't concern you. Personal attacks are harder to ignore. It's never really about you, it's about how the offensive person can't deal with their emotions. They're mentally retarded. Try to understand what the offensive talker says. It's usually difficult to understand. When you hear offensive maybe talking and you're not taking part in the conversation, eavesdropping, and you feel compelled to react, sometimes unfortunately the appropriate thing to do is to talk to yourself about it. Rationalize it calmly and preferably where no one can hear you. Sometimes the offensive maybe talker says something stupid, and when you think about it, that's how you're offended. Just reassure yourself you didn't do or say anything wrong if you haven't, and people feel bad for doing and saying the wrong things. Offensive maybe talkers feel bad as they are talking. Afterwards they have guilt, doubt and worry. If you really didn't do anything wrong, you haven't much reason to feel bad. The offensive people not only have a whole range of negative emotions to try and make them understand, but some of the offensive maybe talkers have mental health problems. If you use the bad experience of coming across offensive maybe talkers correctly, you will be a better person and know it as the truth. The offensive talker is always degraded. Every time you react or have a fight response to something upsetting or offensive, you will feel like you've done something wrong. Guilt. A lot of the time the offensive thing isn't what it seems and is actually normal, positive, excusable behavior. You could misinterpret or overreact. A lot of the time the offensive person is jealous of you and wants to hurt your feelings and or get your attention. Helps to positively reinforce yourself by saying I am better than that person. Gossip that's offensive is the offensive person having fun. They like to twist the truth of a matter to suit their broken egos. Offensive people are always offended and threatened by something and or someone. It's never really about you when they are trying to offend you. It's always about how they can't deal with their own emotions and something that made them upset prior to offending you. So don't feel like you've done something wrong if you haven't, and don't take it personally. It's not really about you. Everything can be handled in a more positive way. Offensive people want you to feel or think bad. You don't have to. You can feel good when someone is trying to be offensive, because you are not a bad person. Dealing with offensive things appropriately makes you feel like a better person. Someone being offensive with you makes you want to be a better person. Offensive people usually say something stupid. You try and rationalize it, which makes them appear to you as being smarter than they actually are. Ignore them. Offensive people worry that they haven't hurt you or hurt you enough and you're dealing with them easily, but most of their worry is about themselves. Offensive people do suffer consequences of their actions, although they're extremely confident they will overcome them. They excuse themselves when their consequences seem too severe. Love supports them, can help them carry on being offensive. With most offensive people there always seems to be a lot of heavy consequences that are not far from them. Offensive people are said to be insecure and act offensively to feel that they have some control in who gets offended. If they're the one being offensive, then there's less chance of them being offended by someone else. You will notice that offensive people will take on either one of two characters, a pretend investigator or a scary bully. Often it's the case that offensive people will be more offensive if they have significant amount of positive support from other people close to them in their lives. Offensive people can often take up their offensive ways as a way of life, as a way of coping. They get a thrill or reward for being offensive and say things like I like the adrenaline rush, I got away with it again. They think I'm a tough guy or I'm in control. Offensive people like the idea that they're teaching their victim the lesson. Usually when they've made the victim feel bad, the victim will want to improve their life or put up a fight in response to the offensive person. Usually the lesson is about doing the right thing because the victim apparently did something wrong. The offensive person usually is wrong because they teach their victim by being offensive. Offensive people like the idea that they're seen as a tough guy and portray a feeling that you're not to mess with them or they will act tough. Offensive people subconsciously portray themselves as mentally retarded. Only in hindsight do they realize that, and they feel bad because of it. When people can appropriately deal with their emotions, it is apparent that they have some sort of mental retardation. Most language or behavior used to be offensive, upsetting or entertaining does appear to be childish, stupid, hard to understand, mentally retarded. When people are offensive, it's because they're jealous of their victim. The victim is usually doing good, being good and feeling good. If it's about the victim having done the wrong thing, the offensive person is wrong by not handling the situation better. Offensive fight response. Everything can be handled in a more positive way. Apparently some offensive behavior is tolerated by society and isn't deemed as breaking the law. Something highly offensive would have attention of police, etc. A lot of people like to say what they want in public. If everyone was allowed to say what they want or how they feel in public, things would get dangerous. Offensive people will often try to excuse their behavior like they're having fun, or they act like they are actually dealing with something offensive themselves, and they handle it by putting up an offensive fight response. When someone has been offensive, they will always try to excuse their behavior and give reason to themselves to carry on being offensive. Most of the time their offensive behavior is inexcusable because most things are best handled in a positive way. A lot of the time the offensive thing isn't what it seems and is actually normal, positive, excusable behavior. You could misinterpret or overreact. A lot of the time the offensive person is jealous of you and wants to hurt your feelings and or get your attention. Helps to positively reinforce yourself by saying, I am better than that person. Gossip that's offensive is the offensive person having fun. They like to twist the truth of a matter to suit their broken egos. All negative emotions and how they can affect you to be offended, offensive and concerned is all a matter of understanding, so you can learn how to be a better person and survive. Even fear from the victim in an attempted murder experience would have served a purpose to help the victim understand the danger of possibly dying and to put up a flight or fight response that's going to satisfy or heal the fear. The emotion itself would go when the danger has gone. Painful memories would serve a reminder to be very careful. Issues of right and wrong are present in every aspect of human behavior and communication. We hope that the systems in place to deal with issues of right and wrong are sufficient, but where some things seem so unfair it's helpful to, or there is a need to, believe in a God and an afterlife where justice prevails with what is so obviously unfair. Missing good and healthy communication. Maybe if we do more of the right things we might survive through the problems we already have. You truly only ever worry about yourself, even when you think you worried about someone else. Hold the truth when others do wrong. Be careful not to be reduced to an offense. Tolerate because you need to be tolerated as well. A different perspective is always disagreeable and agreeable. Strangely, just about anything you do can be helpful. Right or wrong, probably don't have to worry too much about right and wrong because right easily wins. Most likely underneath bad feelings is good times with good people. Asking for help from other people is risky because their opinion matters. You might get what someone else wants you to have, not necessarily what you want. Do the right things now so we don't have problems later on. Justice. Deal with right and wrong in the right way. Apparently people aren't capable of achieving that. Sometimes most of what you have to choose from is offensive, and then once chosen they say you want to be offended. Most likely you're not the reason why someone is offensive. Do the crime, you will do the time. Some things you don't like to do you have to do. All people will try to believe in things but have trouble believing it. Be careful what you choose to believe because it's often never really what it seems to be. Everybody believes in different things, usually to suit their egos. It can be dangerous to just assume things without knowing. Think twice. Remember being told to be careful what you say to other people, because you could upset them, and if you did upset them you would have to apologize. It's like a test, so be healthy. Do the right thing. Keep positive. You're responsible for how you feel, so feel as good as you can. Tolerate people because you have to be tolerated as well. Be careful holding prejudice. Don't assume anything. Be alert. Be prepared for anything. Sometimes you will have a better understanding without prejudice. Normal amounts of anxiety before something is you anticipating you won't like it. Often there is a conflict between what people seem to be helpful and what isn't. Do not care what people think. Stop overthinking the situation. Be confident, accept yourself for who you are and keep things in perspective and positive. Why? So you can't try to be as righteous as possible, but you will still have to overcome being offended and upset. The HEY feel bad when trying to be good and they feel good when trying to be bad. EVERYO, and you will learn the full extent of their actions and receive all of their consequences. They KNOWING that everyone has consequences for doing right and wrong. Would you be more or less concerned? Less and more? EVERYBODY has an opinion. Make sure yours is the right one. The HER are a lot of warnings that go out to people who have already learned need to be careful and do the right thing. DOING good. It's the easiest thing to do. It helps to take a step back from an offensive direction before it manifests into not only your problem but others as well. Be inspired by wrong things to do good, not bad. It's all about the individual. Anything and everything that any individual experiences is their own. All of life is experienced on the inside. Everything outside our life is about understanding so we can cooperate to achieve and or satisfy our needs. Most bad emotions, regret, guilt, worry, anxiety, stress, panic, hate, anger, depression, etc. are for people to make sense of their lives. It helps people to understand. If there is an inappropriate amount of any bad emotion, you would need to appropriately address the issues involved, to live more how you would like. Life can feel like you're being tested. There are obstacles along the way. You have to handle them in a positive way. If you don't, there are consequences. People in positions to change things for the whole nation's government allow the sale of tobacco, alcohol and gambling. But the individual involved in buying such goods are made to feel bad by other people and the government for doing the wrong thing, when it's the government and providers of the product that are the real problem regarding those products. Everything good or bad leaves its mark and has long-ranging consequences. God's justice prevails. Do the best you can and survive. Feel good and worry concern. Essential worry or concern helps to do the right thing and understand. Be careful with what you choose to do or say, because your choice will either make you feel good or feel bad. Do good, be good, feel good. Do the right things. Do the best you can. Do bad, be bad, feel bad. Do too much wrong, feel too bad. You would need help how to understand offensive communication, and being offended by communication is more helpful than communicating offensively. Have you ever felt confused about what you believe is just offensive communication? Have you ever struggled with offensive communication where being offended left you feeling wrong when you haven't done or said anything wrong? Well, understand offensive communication, and being offended by communication is more helpful than communicating offensively. Understanding offensive communication usually starts with feeling offended. When you're offended by communication, you will still have an opportunity to react positively. You will be motivated and have an opportunity to react positively or negatively. When you've offensively communicated, you have usually communicated the wrong thing. If you offensively communicate, you're likely to feel more offended than the receiver of your offensive communication. People in authority can offensively communicate to ensure you feel offended regarding something offensive. People in authority can use offensive communication as a way of teaching right from wrong. Offensive communication can be appropriate when dealing with something you dislike. Communicating the right thing in the right way is what's needed. The book author retains sole copyright to his or her contributions to this book.